highly matrifocal. Without the woman, the whole thing falls apart. The woman is the axis, and we know it. The woman is the axis for the home. And that carries with it a particular weight. Now I know, and the reason maybe why there's not sufficient appreciation for it is because you're all so good that you make it look easy. You carry a heavy weight. Women, I understand it. You carry a heavy weight, but you do so a lot of times without murmuring. To support the home, and I have seen it, I have taught this in courses that I've had to teach, that the major role and the major carrier of the support of the home in many Caribbean homes is woman. In terms of the discipline. In terms of the discipline within the home. And then I'm not talking beating. I'm not an advocate. I'm not talking beating. I'm talking about the discipline of making sure children are raised properly in a disciplined manner. That's what I mean by discipline. I hope you understand me, right? That in terms of the discipline, and discipline, proper discipline takes time. Proper discipline takes time in order to do it right. And therefore, the man, in the matter of discipline, he doesn't have the time to invest in that. And primarily, it is the woman who is responsible for the discipline of the children. And upon all that she has to carry, that's a heavy load. The matter of nurturing. When I was a little boy growing up, it was not my father whenever I would fall or I would hurt myself or get in trouble, whatever. It was always my mother that would come and hug me. And if there was a bruise or something, she'd hug me. She'd kiss and say, "Come, boy." Don't do it. We're like, "Come, boy." And I'd be like, "Don't do that. Come, boy, it's going to be better tomorrow." Nurturing and teaching you the finer, softer things that are necessary in life. Of love and care and affection. Men don't teach that. That's the women that teach these things. So the nurturing of our homes is a burden that women carry. Are we appreciated? Are we appreciating women for this role? For the responsibilities of earning and what they do with their income? And do we understand how difficult it is for a woman financially? I'm not talking about equity in earnings. That's another matter altogether. But even when women and men are earning the same amount of money, it turns out that men always have more disposable income because, and in the typical home, you will find that the men will help with this and help with that. But then there are many, many other incidental expenses that relate to the running of the home. I wish there was a woman who would say amen. A woman was talking about the fees to take the child to school, and something happens and PTA says they need $60 for this, and there's a t-shirt competition, and there's a jersey that's coming up, and there's so many things that don't have to do with the light bill, don't have to do with the water bill, and don't have to do with the food, but these things are really expensive. And guess whose pocket they come out of? Typically the woman. Do we understand this unseen expense of the woman? Do we understand the weight? And again, I have to nuance what I'm about to say here. Do we understand the susceptibility, particularly of women, to abuse? And do we appreciate? Because I've heard arguments made, and these are factual claims, that in terms of violence, there's far more violence perpetrated against men than perpetrated against women. Generally. Okay? Don't throw me out here. Don't throw me out. Don't throw me out. In terms of our homicide rates or assault and that which have been reported, the police here would affirm to me that if you look at the numbers, that is a higher percentage of men. Follow me? Something in me say, leave that one alone. I'm getting to a point.
You hear what the police say?
The point I'm trying to make is that despite the raw numbers, and again, I understand the raw numbers, I'm actually going to make a point in your favor, that despite the raw numbers, that more men are in jail, more men are assaulted, more men are shot at, more men are killed, and all of that. There still is beneath that veneer, beneath that perceptual veneer, there is a susceptibility of women to violence that we need to underscore. Now you should applaud that, because that's what I need to talk about. In matters of IPV, women are more often than not the victims. I am not exclusively saying that there might not be a couple of female perpetrators, but in terms of intimate partner violence. In terms of intimate partner violence, more often than not, women are the victims rather than the perpetrators. There is a vulnerability of our women. In terms of objectification in our society, which objectification targets you for sexual assaults and other types of assaults. The way women are treated in media, the way women are sold as sex symbols, the way that every single ad, practically every ad, has to show a woman in skimpy clothing in order. I don't understand what a woman in skimpy clothing has to do with selling cotton curls. But if you want to sell Concours, put a woman in skimpy clothing. If you want to sell a bashment, put a woman in skimpy clothing. If you want to sell a fete, put a woman in skimpy. If you want to sell small, what's he drink? Smally. If you want to sell Smally, no, never mind it. If you want to sell Smally, put a woman in skimpy clothing. Objectification, what objectification does, it sets up a woman as an object rather than a person. Are you following me? And when you can objectify a woman and minimize her humanity, you can slap her, beat her, kick her, push her around, and sexually abuse her. There's an objectification of our woman that is very rampant in our society. And do we understand, grasp, and appreciate how women are being objectified? Deep issues, Sister Olivier, deep issues. So when I come to a seminar like this, and I want to talk about hope and leveraging hope, I cannot talk about leveraging hope in isolation from what are the issues. Hope about what? What are we going to hope for? I have to unpack the issues. I haven't even touched the issue that probably is touching and affecting some of the women gathered here, and if not the women gathered here, some of you who are following by media and others who will later view this. The issue of the vulnerability of women to retribution. But every time that you try to, whether privately in your homes, and I've had so many reports and deal with people, I'm aware that sometimes if you dare stand up in your own home, where sometimes you provide practically everything in the home, you provide the couch, you provide the washing machine, you provide the fridge, you provide, and you can't even raise your voice, or you can't even have a point in your home. And the retribution and the pushback, and some of it physical. Are we appreciating that these are the struggles? These are the struggles of our women. These are the real struggles, nuanced to our Vincentian society. Of professional, not just private retribution, but also professionally in the workplace. Women get propositioned. A couple of times they have reached out to me and said, what do I do? Because if I only talk, I lose my job. You get propositioned. And if you, it's basically our version of play for pay. Because if you don't play along, then you don't get paid. Lose job. And again, I will come to the hope related to that as to what we need to do in our society. How we need to cope and how we need to find avenues of redress. Because words don't really bring hope. Words can inspire, but words don't bring it. I talk all the good words I want today. I leave here with a feel good feeling, but something else has to be done beyond that. We appreciate this is a struggle. I listen to struggles of women all across the world, and on my radio program this week, I said the struggle of women all across the world and the global issues that they face are not necessarily our issues. I have to key in and zero in and nuance what our issues are. Sister Richards, this is not to disrespect. This is saying I have collaboration and solidarity in supporting the woman everywhere. But at the same time, I want us not to cast our issues broadly in light of the issues of the other women around the world, because what a woman struggle in the mutilation of the genitalia, for example, in one country, it's not what we are facing. So I don't want to raise a voice about that. What a woman in the Middle East is facing because of the particular structures of her religious laws, that she cannot be educated. Because of the structures of her religious laws, she cannot be educated. And by right, UN and the other global organizations that advocate for these things, by right, they should make a big noise about that. But that's not the kind of noise I want to make in St. Vincent. That's not an issue for our women in St. Vincent. Are we understanding this? In many other places where the rights of women, whether of suffrage or to vote and to determine and to be decision makers, they are absolutely silent, whether by legal enactments or by religious practice. And religious practice in many societies render women silent. Religious practice in many societies render women silent. And wherever that is happening, there needs to be a voice raised to address that. But that's not our issue in St. Vincent, and that's why I've begun this way. What are our struggles that we need hope, and what are our struggles that we need aspiration? What are the real things that are affecting our women? Representation in places of power, and I know that is a global issue, but in our own country, I heard glass ceiling. But really, is there really a glass ceiling? Is there a sufficient voice of women in places of power? Do we have hope there? Or are we seeing the light that indeed there is an avenue for hope when it comes to this matter? We have very powerful people in this room. Don't tell me that, for example, Sister Richards is not powerful, the National Council of Women is not powerful, Sister Oliver with Marian House and all that you do, and we should really applaud that. And all of the whistle stops that you did on I heard about it too. We have representation in places of power, and powerful women are representing us, the women in our society of women. So let me ask this then. That was the first question I want to ask. Are there issues of struggles? And the answer, by and large, is yes. I could go on and on. I could talk about common law issues. I could talk about property right issues. I could talk about a lot of things that matter to women in this country. But time. Wow. So let me ask this then. Let me ask this. Admitting that there are issues of struggle, admitting that women in St. Vincent have things that when I say we, Vincentian women, all right, I am not obviously, but I use the word we inclusively. When I admit that there are issues there that are not yet moved along to the utopian ideal that we say, okay, we have arrived, okay, we are at that. On the various issues, and let that be a reminder for all, just go ahead and put your phone on silent, please, okay? On the various issues, we are at different points. On the various issues, the women are at different points in the journey towards progress along the pathway. On the matter, for example, of representation of women in places of power, that has perennially been a struggle for women. But in St. Vincent, you are making really good traction regarding representation. I have thought about pushing a charge, and I said so on one of my radio programs, on the matter of laws related to property ownership and other bequeathment. You would be interested in this. Bequeathment to what we call common law wives. Let me not touch that board. I thought that was like, I would hear, yeah. But the people who fight this relief, legal relief for common law wives are not even men. It's a troublesome area. Somebody say, Pastor, leave that alone. The people who fight against the welfare and the upliftment of the status of common law wives are often women. And while advocating for relief for common law women requires some forward-thinking legislation, and that would be alleviating in a large way to the welfare of many women. There's a certain retarding of the process. You know what? Let me just drop that and leave that there. I was here to call here to bring hope and to talk about hope, and I believe that this is an area of hope for many women. But I also believe it's an area of struggle because of how other women who are otherwise entitled would feel about this matter. It's a ticklish matter both for the church and it's a ticklish matter both for other levels and stratas of society. So let me leave that there. How do I conclude, therefore? How do I conclude? As I've talked this morning intentionally, I've talked to you women, and not just those of you who are gathered here, but wherever you will hear this, I just talk to you about where you are in the struggle and try to be real about it and acknowledge that there has been, on the different areas of struggle, there have been different levels of progress and advancement on the pathway. And some you are making great progress, but others have been perennial struggles for our women, and I itemize them. But I've also not only talked about the struggles, I have talked about, in giving you hope, I have talked about the levels of empowerment that currently exist among our women, if only you would leverage it. I've talked about the impediments that though you might be empowered educationally, or though you might be empowered by the social avenues or by the economic advances that you have made, though you may be empowered, there might be some things that are yet impeding you and continually placing a struggle upon you despite your empowerment. And in light of that, I have talked about the primacy. I have talked about the primacy for legal, advocating heavy legal measures that will protect and support the affairs of women. And I don't think that all that needs to be in place there is there. And if I were on the advisory board to women, this is exactly where I would come into your meetings and advise you to advocate and agitate and to push really hard for in terms and keep a noise about laws to protect and the enforcement of proper laws relating to women. That's where I would make my noise. But having said all of that, there is an area of empowerment for women that I have not touched yet. And therein lies the inspiration and the hope. And it's in the matter of spiritual empowerment. Women are made in the image of God, and in the writ of God, women are equal to man, execonitso, equal of equal substance. In the Bible, a helpmeet. When Eve was brought to Adam, she was not a help that was more than, she was not a help that was less than, she was a helpmeet. Conveniently interpreted as helpmeet. Women are not helpmeets. Anybody that calls you a helpmate, slap them. I mean, you're verbally, you just say, stop that. And because when God gave that etzakonitsu and he says, well, woman, help me, meet, equal. Men have translated that help meet, and therefore you are my mate here to help me. Made you a servant, relegated you to a servant. So correct their theology. Women are made in the image of God and are in equal status with men. Galatians 3:28. Carry that with you. Typically, however, more women are in touch as compared to men. More women are in touch with their spiritual selves. It's a source of hope. It's a source of your mental, emotional, and spiritual coping all wrapped up in one. You asked me to talk about spiritual coping and mental coping. It is this thing within a woman that I don't understand. This spiritual capacity within a woman. In our home growing up, and my father was a great man, religious man, but it was always my mother who would call us together for prayer. Whenever I left home every morning after I done finished pat down my head with the exercise book with the tables on the back. When I finished pat down in those days I had hair. Boy, that was a good look. But I finished, my mother come put her hand on my head still. And all of us one by one, and she would pray. She was the spiritual anchor that meant something. That prayer, she knew that we didn't have a lot of stuff, and we didn't have this, we didn't have that, but she understood the value of prayer. There was a spiritual empowerment. That was her coping mechanism. The Bible and I wish I had more time, but the Bible speaks about women who are in the status of struggle, who are in the place of struggle. But the Bible doesn't speak of them as people without hope and people without avenue. The woman with the issue of blood, she had a physical issue she had to push against. She had a religious issue. She was discriminated against because she was bleeding, and you know the religious laws. If you're bleeding, nobody can touch you. Your husband can't touch you. Anybody touch you, they can't even go worship, and you can't go worship. And so for 12 years, she was isolated from worship, which is a lot of times the core of who you are. And she was isolated from worship. She had a lot going on. Socially, she was not accepted. Financially, she was broke because the Bible says she spent all seeking relief. And so she had nothing left, and no mention is made of a man. So this was a single woman struggling. So the Bible is very familiar with women who struggle, but the way the Bible posits them and puts them out there, that this morning when she heard that Jesus was in town, man, she decided, today he ain't passing without me going. And she knew the rule. You're not supposed to touch. You're not supposed to get out. You're not supposed to be there. But she was like, even social conventions she was with. And I hope I'm speaking to a woman here. Even social conventions, she was willing to go past and push past our social norms and social conventions so that she can do what she has to do. Not a woman here. Don't let what they say stop you. Push past the social norms and the social conventions. The Bible advocates you think the Bible didn't know that she had issue of blood? But does the Bible condemn her for that? No. And she pushes back and she does the unthinkable. She does the unthinkable. Jesus now, the rabbi, the religious man, with all that she knew from Leviticus, you don't touch him, you don't want him. You know what she did? And she knew that she was breaking the law. She knew she was breaking the religious law. But that's the kind of militancy that women need for change. She knew she was breaking the law. But she reached out and she reached out and she reached out and she touched the hem of his garment. She touched the hem. You have to reach beyond the social customs. Sometimes what the law would restrict and impede you to do. No, Pastor advocating breaking the law. But some of the unjust laws that Martin Luther and others have said, sometimes a law, if it is a just law, if it is an unjust law, then you should protest against it. And she reached out because it was her faith in the balance that day. And she reached out and she brushed past people, customs, laws. She brushed past everything so that she could get redress. If only our women can have this kind of mentality, that I will brush past anything And then Jesus turned. I'm not finished yet. And then Jesus turned to her. And he's like, who touched me? And they're like, oh, you crazy. All these people around you, you don't, how are we going to know? He said, something went out of me. Who touched me? And she said, and she expected, she looked at him, and I'm sure she expected condemnation. I am sure she expected. And sometimes, women, when you are afraid of condemnation, you don't make you move. And when you are afraid of reprimands, you don't make you move. And when you are afraid of disapproval, you don't make you move. But she didn't even think through who gonna condemn me, who gonna reprimand me, who gonna disapprove me. She made her move, and then I've often said this, man, it's easier to just do you do and say sorry than to ask permission first. So she did her did, and she did her do. And then Jesus turned around, and he never, knowing that she should not have come out, he didn't disapprove her. Knowing that he should not have pushed to the crowd, he did not condemn her. And knowing that she should not have touched the hem of his garment, he did not judge her, but he commended her. And I want to commend all of the women of St. Vincent and the Grenadines who are pushers, push past social norms and customs and rules and hang up and all of that to get to the issues and the struggles that I outlined earlier, that you will get to these issues and struggles and fight for women. There are others I could tell you about who pushed against the power establishment of the day. Esther, when the entire state machinery was against her and the struggles of her people. And she said, if I perish, I perish by going in. Woman, when you have issues of struggles, I am not saying, watch me, I am not saying that you have not made progress, but I itemize various areas where the struggles still continue. And I said to you, be like Esther and say, if I perish, I perish. I'm going to fight up. There is your hope. The Bible shows you that you could have hope and you could have aspirations in the midst of your struggles and crisis. Lastly, one woman, boy, I wish I had the time. One woman in Luke 18, she had an issue for provision. And she, who do I go to? A matter, who do I go to? She said, I will go to the judge. And she go to the judge, and the judge said, woman, leave me alone. And she went back, woman, leave me alone. And you get down to verse 5, and he says, man, the judge said, this woman will drive me out of my mind. I wish there were women in St. Vincent. You don't leave the matters alone. And if it drives them out of their mind, drive them till your issues are addressed. And the biblical pattern is, if you don't give up, if you don't relent, if you don't mind the criticism, if you don't mind the pushback, if you don't mind the reprimand, if you go after what you have to go after relentlessly, one day, God bless. Oh, I have to stop and ask for questions. I have to stop. Do you have a question or a comment? I didn't really mean to preach a sermon, but I got fired up there after a while. I applaud, by the way, the existence of the family court. A lot of my friends and a couple of former students of mine, work at the family court, and I know their efforts. But I know that despite that, and if you're not careful, that can become a window dressing, that you say, well, we have the family court, but how do we make sure that it does what it's supposed to do to the redress of women's issues? And there are a lot of women who, despite the existence of the family court, they're feeling like, I have no alleviation of my pressure. So that's a matter that we can't just talk about. Because stirring the talk about is good for the hour and then we're done. But what's going to happen? I'll come back to that anyway. Stacy. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I know it's in the lunchtime, but we're wrong, but we must spiral it out. Because we don't understand where we came from, and we don't understand why we are still forever trying to come out and break free. How many of you, as current public servants, would say two things? One, somebody knock on the door, oh, that's a woman, let me go and see what she wants because she probably have to hustle back. No, it's another person come in. probably suck your tea, you put your chair, you sit down and find something. What special help do we give to a woman that comes through our door for our service? I do not have the answer. It's just for you to think about. Do you make a difference other than wanting to look like Beyonce and behave like Beyonce? Do you make a difference? What difference are you making as a woman when you sit behind that desk? Them have to wait for me become in charge. Elijah me in charge. She could say she don't have to wait, she could so. How do we treat women? How do we treat women when they come to the door? Do we make a difference? That could have been my mother, my grandmother. Let me go the extra mile. Or is it when you see them coming to the door at 5 to 4, hustling from wherever they came from to catch you, your bag on your shoulder, and the humbug may become what go shall come to the door, and we blame government, and we blame overseas agencies, and we blame everybody. The blame is not with us. I would reiterate that point. We are the ones who are causing our own problems, and we tend to blame everybody except ourselves. I want to mention about education. You said that women these days, they not misquote you. I enjoyed this morning. You said that they have the availability.
Right.
You said no, you didn't say. You said access.
Access.
Right, that's the word. Pastor, it might be there or there. It is available. I will not agree with you. It is always accessible to everybody. Yeah. They're two very different concepts. And when you sat and you spoke about accessibility, I said, no, he get it one way. There are a lot of women, while the doors are open, and when nobody is saying you can't come, they don't have access. And so while the empowerment strategy is there, it is not always accessible. There are quite a few things in the mix that will prevent them from gaining the official access. And my last point, although I'm far, I just spend the rest of the day on this. My last point is that this is the start of an official position. When are we going to have the grassroots versions where we come in here with our titles in the communities where they need the transformation? Okay? Are we going to say, oh, well, the funding agency is sending no money so we can have the one in the community? Or are we going to go in those same communities and mobilize the resources in the communities and get it? Thank you very much.
I want to stand up so you can I'm a backbone. I am Jeannie. We talk about education. It doesn't matter how much education we have. If we don't take the theory out of it, and we don't feel it here, and feel it here, may as well we don't have no education. And you talk about the community, where the youth groups, we don't have non-functioning since 2001. We don't have a national youth council. We don't have a women's group. Yes, because of the issue with COVID. Since 2018, we weren't able to meet. But what is it? We have a gender affairs, not women's affairs anymore. They're gender. They are supposed to work. I was head of it. I know. I spent 15 years there. So they're supposed to help the National Council of Women to ensure that the National Council of Women function. But you have people in the public service paid, getting salary and getting traveling. Where are the community groups? You have a community division within the ministry. You know, Where are me up, you know. That is why I represent 25 national level organizations called the Network of NGOs. And you know, the powers of be say I talk too much. And one of them asked me, who make me Lord and Master? But we know the preacher, the Bible says that there is a voice. Somebody has to speak for the voiceless. And if I am that person, then I am the person. I beg in those public servants who are here this morning. I beg in Iowa, do Iowa work. Yes. No National Council of Women, no National Youth Council, no national community groups. What are we doing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? I could carry up Marion House and I have a list. I have a list take up on the side road. All the national women's group, all the women's group in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, all the youth groups, them did it. All the community groups, they listed it. What happened to them today? Between 2001 and 2023, 22 years, they're dead. Come on, young people. I am, somebody said 73, I 73 this year.
That's a good impressive thing that I'm going to do. That's a good, strong, vibrant 73. But I got the call. I'm just gonna go sit there because I don't have answers. And a lot of that, as I hear the stuff, I sat down there and said, let me stay out of that, you hear? Because that's between A and B and I go see myself out. So, yeah, but I want to say this, so, because I've led other things, and I know there's a place for talk and stuff, but because maybe I'm this kind of straight line thinker, I like to have the discussions, but then out of that, have a laundry list, if you will, and then prioritize my laundry list. Let's just say by the time we convene again next year, where we need to see traction, where we need to see movement, and that's what I would think. Ultimately, now I'm not saying talk is bad, but if that's it, if that is all, then that's not it. We have to now say, what is it with respect to women's affairs that we want to see things taken action? You know, if I were in on this, I know what I would put close to the top of my list. I think I indicated what I would put to the top. But you can't just take a shotgun and just do a shotgun approach and shoot and bullets going everywhere. You have to have a rifle approach where you snipe at something. Let us say you identify 2 or 3 or 4 major burning issues related to women. Then you begin your action force, your task force, your advocacy. Well, you need agitation and advocacy. You need people who are vibrant. Jenny McDowell, for example, is your born agitator. She can raise a noise. But you have some quiet voices, people representatives from different organizations who are connected with very powerful figures. And that's where you need your voices of advocacy in the police force. For example, form a friendship with the two police representatives here and other police people, and see where, not necessarily in loud voices of agitation, because I have found also that a lot of what I can get accomplished does not come through loud voices of agitation, but it comes through the quiet collaboration of advocacy, if you follow what I mean. So I build relationship with people, I form relationship, I negotiate and sit and chat. And if we have to go to lunch, we go to lunch. If we have to take a cup of coffee somewhere, but you should be surprised. I might not have the power, but I know people with the power. Let me show you how advocacy works. You remember you used to have a plastic bag all over grocery stores? Remember that? Somebody, how do I say this? You know, somebody, it was a burning thing with them, that plastic damaging the environment. And they knew who to talk to, who to talk to, who to talk to. It's law. If you want things done, you can get things done. Advocacy. Not always raising a noise. Advocacy. Get it legalized.
Oh, Lord.
legalized.
I sat down a little bit too long. I'm getting there, Jeannie. Thank you. Can we give Dr. Richards a round of applause? Thank you, Dr. Richards. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Any more burning questions you'd like to answer? You like to get the answers for?
So let us pull our resources together. And believe me, if we do that, we'll be a force to reckon with. So enjoy the rest of your day and even soon, but let us love one another.
Okay, so we are running with time. I just want to reiterate in terms of empowerment, where women are their education. We have education, social, and we have spiritual empowerment. We just need to leverage on them. Contrary to Jeannie's about women's group, we do have women's group in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have community groups and we do have the church groups as well who we would partner with. One of the barriers that we have been met with over a period of time is that before, in Jeannie's time, there were a lot of donor agencies, and so you had less groups and you had more monies that could have gone around, more funding. So you would have had your meeting and you had to do your projects. You get projects proposal, you write your projects and you get funding. But today, the stipulation on the funding is very much different than when it was in Jeannie's day. And what happens is that a lot of people at that time would work voluntarily, but today, people do not want to work, doesn't want to give voluntary service. If you ask a group to come up from Rose Hall, the council has to provide transportation to and from the event if you ask them to come to Kingston. So what we have to do, we have to keep moving into the areas and meet with the people in the area because, as I said, funding comes slow. Another thing is that when you write your projects, there are so many persons because right now the projects are more regional than within the country. So you have more projects that are being written, and so the chances of getting that project approved is very slim. Jeannie seemed not to agree with me, but I know what I am talking about. We've been writing projects, and you talk to people, but I'm not seeing you. I see you turn around. Yes. So these are some of the barriers that we have been met with, but that does not mean that the groups are not. And if the persons here from the various churches can attest that their women's group are active, isn't that so? Church groups. Very well, very much so. So you're true. So this is where we collaborate. When we have these sessions, we bring the groups together. Okay. There is also a version of this activity this activity was really meant for persons within the workplace. Because one of the things that I have recognized that a lot of women we walk around with our baggages, and no one knows what we are going through. When I spoke to Pastor about the mental status of our women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, not crazy people, I'm not talking about crazy people as we would call it, our mental status in that we have to look at the children in the home, we are parents, we have to deal with the PTA, we may have two children, one maybe at secondary, one at primary, or 2 or 3 at primary, but at different levels. Tell me about it when you have to deal with them in their homework. And then you go home and afternoon after you come out of the workplace, where some of us go through a lot of stress, pressure at the workplace. And then we have to go home and face our family. Sometimes we don't have all that we would have wanted. Somebody's crying for, the child is crying for one, another child is asking for something else. The diversity of problems we as women go through. Our mental status can be deteriorating daily, and we may not even know it. We may think, well, okay, the child might come in and we start blaming the child, as my sister said. They begin to start abusing them verbally, mentally, psychologically, because we get on the phone and we think, oh, you all go to your bed, and you're on the phone, maybe surfing or trying to keep up with the Facebook and the TikToks, trying to get your relief there. But you don't know that it is your mental status that is deteriorating while you are looking for a relief there. So this is one of the reasons why we need to reach out. That's why we need our spiritual, very important to have our spiritual empowerment. So as I said, we, from the National Council of Women, we want to reach out. We are going to be reaching out into the communities with roundtable session. And this activity, I hope I'm seeing your interest. I've heard you. We want, if with your permission, we can have another session like this. What do you say?
Yes.
So that would be one of the way forward. And we don't want, when we sent out the invitation letters, we asked for the men. Not that we don't want to keep the men out of the equation. And we cannot keep the men out of the equation, women. I attended a meeting in St. Lucia a couple of years ago. And we had a man he made a presentation. And after that, the way forward in that meeting is that we're in collaboration. And one woman stood up and she said, so do you mean that we have to work with the men? Mm-hmm. And I stood up and I said, if we are not going to work with the men, I am in the wrong place. I have 3 sons, and at that time I had a husband. So then if I'm not working with the men, and I am in the wrong place. And if you do not want to work with the men, women, you are in the wrong place. We need the men to know this is what the women want. This is how we should work together. Right, Pastor? We ought to work together with the men. So don't try to push the men out because one would have perpetrated some form of evil against you. That does not mean the others are not working with us. Okay? So we are going to be working with the men.
But there can be no true equality until women and men together have their destiny.
Okay, I would want you to repeat that again.
There can be no true equality until women and men together plan their destiny.
Together. So that's why we need to work together. Okay? Anything else we want to touch on? Anybody else have anything to say? I know you're burning up within, and you probably don't want to. Okay. So at this time, we'll continue with our program. I had set back the brief remarks, but I have not seen the permanent secretary of the ministry. Is she here? No? Okay, so I will ask Jeannie Oliver to take the floor and give a short and brief of the network of NGO. Welcome her.
I didn't have to, but the network of NGO constitutes 25 national organizations, and we started way back in 1985, and we started as an HIV NGO network. That was when we had our rampant cases of HIV in our country, and people used to stone the houses of those who lived there and pass them, curse them, and so on. That's how we started. We started with 5 NGOs, then we went to 8, now we have 25. So we constitute a lot of, not only public service union, teachers union, we have churches represented, we have various, the employers federation, we have 25 of them. So all I would like us to continue to do from the level of the network is for us to embrace equity. We can't say equal, we can't say equality, because we might have equal opportunities, but still we don't take advantage of them. So fairness in every single thing that we do. Pastor, thank you very much for your presentation. Remember the word equity. It talks about fairness, regardless of which political party you belong to, which denomination you belong to, which status in society you hold, which community you come from. We all as women, and I don't like to hear us say that we are home anymore. I would like for us to be positive and make something that what is favorable for you, not because you're Venezuelan, is also favorable for me. Not because you may be working at legal affairs and something is favorable for you, but because Jen is retired, she knows it's not favorable for me. Let's remember the word equity, please. Fairness in every single thing that we do and every person that we do. Thank you.
Are at the end of our program. Let me thank everyone. Before we go, there is a recording I want us to take at it, and we're waiting on the lunch. It should have been here at 11. We are scheduled ready to finish at 11:30, but I put it for 12 just in case Pastor would have gone on a little longer.
Oh, now you tell me. Now you tell me.
And I want to take the disclaimer here, Pastor. I want to take the blame because I know you said 2 lines in the bio, but when I read through the thing, I said, we need to know who this man is. Because when I told persons, they said, who is the featured speaker? I said, Dr. Cecil Richards. Who is Dr. Cecil Richards? Yes, there are those who they probably would have heard the voice on the radio, but do not know who that particular person is. So they were not able to put a face, a body structure, a physical structure to that name and that voice.
Okay, you know,